So you know what? We stop looking for people, places, and things that we fit into. This is the wisdom of aging at 60. I had to say to someone earlier, don't confuse my enthusiasm and my willingness and my desire with a need to.
Mm. Hey everyone, welcome to Unapologetically 50 Plus. My name is Angela. So today we are going to talk about overcoming anxiety about aging. And in this two-part series, we're going to dive into the emotional, mental, and societal pressures that come with aging, especially for women 50 and beyond. We're going to learn how to reframe our mindset, release fear, and step into this next season of our life with confidence, self-love, and grace. But before we get started, I have one huge favor to ask. If you find any value or enjoy the content, please remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let YouTube know you want more of this content. It's free and you are helping us build this community. So we thank you and we truly appreciate your support. All right, now let's get this conversation started. Hey everyone, so thank you for joining us. And I have my beautiful guest, Miss Temple. So let me tell you a little bit though. Temple is my therapist. I wanted to bring her on because we wanted to talk about what it's like or the anxiety of aging. So, as most of you might know, I'm 58, so I'm closer to 60 than I am 50. But I know at some point we all feel like, this aging thing, and we start going in our heads about I'm getting older, life is short, life is shortening. What what's going to go on for the rest of my time? So, what we're going to do is we are going to talk about the anxiety of aging. And like I said, Temple is a therapist. She's an amazing woman. So, let's get started. How you doing, Temple?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Angela Parker, for having me as your guest. Um, Certainly an interesting thing to be outed as someone's therapist for a show, for an episode at YouTube for my actual client, my actual patients
Yeah.
show. But you and I discussed this ahead of time, right? And I said to you, it really has to be your choice. And so
Yep.
I'm going with the flow of it. It's really nice to be here with you.
All right. So, Temple, tell us or tell the audience a little bit about you, meaning, like I said, you're a therapist. Any special area of therapy? Can you tell them a little bit about you? Because I see, and I also want to mention that I know you said you don't like to use the what are the letters behind your name, but
Yes.
I'm curious, and I'm sure the
What
audience,
does that mean? What
what
is
is it?
what is the
Yes, exactly.
LICSWMALEXYNZ?
What is it? Yes.
Well, no. Actually, this is always something I'm happy to speak about. Primarily, so there are many paths to becoming a clinical therapist. I'm not talking about coaching, which is another way of helping people sort through their feelings and their thoughts and their choices. And coaching is amazing. But coaching would be non-clinical. I'm a clinical therapist. There are a number of different paths to becoming a clinical therapist. One of them is through actually becoming a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, but psychiatrists really don't specialize in talking therapy. They're there to study the science and the medication. I want to use some, right. Psychiatrists are there to look at the chemistry of disease
Mhm.
in terms of mental health. more than they're there to, let's say, give counseling. They give counsel, but a psychiatrist would require a patient who's dealing, let's say, with some serious or persistent uh, yeah, persistent, that's the word, mental health crises or genetic mental health issue like depression or anxiety that just comes along with the family genetic curse. You couldn't have dodged it if you tried. We really, here, I don't want to go too geeking out on you, but in this way, right, we're talking about the physiological differences and components of my physiological insides and workings versus yours, right? My
Okay.
DNA, your DNA. All right. So psychiatrists are focusing on the chemistry of the body
Okay.
as it applies to how it affects the mind,
Okay.
and then we're using science always across the disciplines to see how it affects behavior.
Oh, okay.
Right. So at the end of but then there are psychologists, there are licensed independent clinical social workers, and that's what I am. There are MFTs, marriage family therapists. All of these folks, at a minimum, have to have a master's degree in that clinical field, and then go on to be independently licensed as I am, or become, and you still, whether you have a PhD or an LCSW, you have to become licensed in order to call yourself clinical. That's it. We can we accept Medicare and insurance is right with clinical, and we don't need anyone else to supervise us. I'm not saying that therapists don't need to be in community and in collaboration with other clinical therapists.
Mhm.
It's just that we have reached our terminal education practice.
Oh, okay.
Does that make any
Interesting.
sense?
And yeah,
Yeah.
that makes
But
sense.
I do have to say,
Yes.
being an LCSW, a licensed independent social worker, we do believe that we're a little bit like, at the top of the game.
Okay.
It's just a difference in study.
Okay.
We believe in something called a systems perspective,
Hmm.
the individual, micro, the community, the family, the church, that experience, that chunk of
Oh,
stuff.
okay.
You go the meso, and then macro, the larger government society. So it's law, it's ethics, it's families, it's psychology. It's just the person, really, the individual, in the mind. So a little bit different, but I'm a proud social worker. At my core, I'm a social worker who
Okay.
became licensed as a clinical therapist. And we are, last thing I'll say, we are 75% of the population of therapists that any given American would see.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So let me ask you this. What makes aging such a common source of anxiety, especially when
Oh,
physical change becomes noticeable? So yeah, what goes on with us as we age that brings on that anxiety?
yeah. Well, aging is associated with loss, right?
Hmm.
Aging is associated with grief and loss, and that loss becomes focused in youth and vitality. At the same time, we are experiencing aging loss around us. It's true that by the time we're 50, 55 years old, we start experiencing, hearing about more deaths in our family, right? Deaths with our friends. Our body, we start noticing minor changes even in our bodies, like, for example, our sight.
Right.
One of the things is that I used to be a woman with 20/20 vision. Yeah. And, you can just track it as you get older. So it's like the scales, as one thing goes up, age, getting older, wisdom, even experience, another thing, a deficit occurs, a real deficit. But in this society, we do associate aging with loss,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't often talk about, especially when it comes to women and women of color.
Mm-hmm.
We have no focus on the changes. Instead, the focus is on um, youth, vitality.
Right.
We begin to lose our relevance.
Mm.
Yeah, I think.
Mm. So why do many people struggle with feeling? Why do we feel, you talked about losing who we are. So why do we struggle with feelings of invisibility or irrelevance?
I mean, I think it's very true that Western society focuses on the productivity of youthfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We do that in everything that's media associated. Strength is youthfulness.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if I'm and I think it's not just we're not just talking about mental strength, right? So I say, as a 50, when I was like 55 years old, if I stumbled a little bit, someone might say, "Oh, ma'am, this time right, in your life when you've been." So I think that we are really trying to still find a place, or many of us folks that are aging see ourselves the same way we saw ourselves 10 or 20 years beforehand. But oftentimes you might find as an aging person that there is a judgment, a prejudgment that is being made about what your strengths are,
Yeah.
what your cognitive, what your sharpness was a word I was looking for. It'll come back to me. It's not stamina, it's there's another word. It'll come back to me in a second. But what your cognitive recall is, those things. But, there was once upon a time where the youth would look upon the aging or the elders
Mm-hmm.
with great awe
Right. And
to
reverence.
receive their tremendous wisdom.
Right.
So I think that this is gen, generally at this time a making of the way we live today with the impact of social media influence.
Yeah.
Also, it is just very naturally how we live, particularly in America, as capitalists who move away from family, who don't sit 3, 4, 5 generations at restaurants and what have you.
Right.
So if you're not being raised around and with your grandparents, your aging aunts and uncles,
Right.
you may only be you're normalizing aging
Right.
through what's being fed to you from the media.
And I think that that makes a lot of sense because um, if you think about it, we look at, and even when my mother was still around and my aunt, we look at, and I caught myself doing it because we see the body deteriorating. We don't realize, and some folks and some older folks like my mom, she was sharp. Her mind was still sharp, but we don't look at that and think of that as value because we're looking at the physical appearance of she's struggling to walk, you know, even sometimes she forgets words, but her mind was still sharp.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of our parents as they get older or we see our family members get older that yes, there's a decline, a mental decline, but there's still so much wisdom in there. And if we took the time to sit down and talk to them and be patient, because yes, it's going to take them a little more time to get out
Yes.
what they have to say, but there's so much more wisdom, you know,
That's it.
in there that we just need to pull out and sit and listen. But we don't take that time because, like you said, basically we're in a fast food society and they
Move
want
it.
it now. Move it, right. Say what you got to say, hurry up. And, because I find
And
myself struggling with words. It's like, okay, what am I trying to say? But yeah,
it
it's,
gets more real. I love what you said, Angela. Be- as you were speaking, what I was thinking inside was and this very much has to do with a social work perspective. And I mean, I'm, I went to a social work high school. I went to Jane Addams High School in the Bronx back in the day when that was still an all girls high school. And so, but the tenets of the social work is exactly that. So my comment in my head was whatever happened to meeting people where they are.
Mm,
And this idea that as our aunties and our relatives age, and again, this is unique to how American society has played out. We say 18, get out. I was one of them. Go here. Here's your bag.
right,
Here's, as we would say back in the day, here's your car fare. Here's your, here's your get on. Right. But this is not, we know that the developmental process doesn't adulthood doesn't even end until the age of 26, right? So we know now that this is very much an American ideology. And so on the one hand, it's made a lot of independent individuals out of us, but on the other hand, it sent a lot of us out, unprepared for what that old school generational life and knowledge looks like. So, for example, the approach in Germany is Uma, or Uma, great
mm,
grandmother.
mm,
Oh, this is a privilege to have them here. You go slower. They walk slower. You walk slower. They think slower. You think slower. Not
right.
maybe she'll eat lunch or he. And I think this is a tough thing, Angela, because many, so I live with some very amazing people, and the guy said to me the other day, the landlord, he said, "Aren't you a baby boomer?"
Oh,
And and he said it in a way like, "Didn't you start all this mess?" You know, and I thought, well, actually, I'm Gen Z,
no, we're Gen
or Gen,
X.
I'm Gen X,
Right.
excuse
We're
me.
Gen X.
I'm Gen X. I'm straight up Cyndi Lauper, Diana Ross, right? Like,
Right,
boom, flock of seagulls. That's
right,
right.
right.
The Police. That's what I came up with. Aretha Franklin, just James Brown, like straight up. And by the way, I'd like to brag that I grew up 7 blocks away from where Malcolm X was killed. I walked to the Autobahn. That's where I grew up.
Wow.
601 West 160th Street, apartment 10E 10032.
Okay.
But so there is this I remember being a young social worker working. I'm a medically trained social worker, and I've had a really amazing career.
Hmm.
And I've also worked for the government and in the medical capacity. And I remember being, let's say, in my 30s, and then having a new employee, a new personnel join,
Hmm.
and they were in their 50s, and me kind of seeing the hell
Yeah.
they were getting. And now I'm that person.
Yes. Yeah. And what's so interesting though is, and we've talked about this in, my session, is that, you don't feel the age. Yeah, your back might hurt. You might, have some, aches and pains, but mentally, I don't, when I
You're exuberant.
exuberant, I don't feel like well, I say 60 because I'm closer to 60, like I said, than I
You
am
might as
50.
well.
Right, exactly. Just go on and claim it. Just go on and claim it. But
There
I
is no
don't,
going backwards. That's the
right,
whole
there's
point.
no going backwards, but I don't feel that
No,
way
how could
until,
you?
right, until something reminds me, whatever that is, it reminds me that that I'm on the I hate to say downhill, but I mean, you're,
This is what it is. You know that you are finally right. But listen, Angela, this is so amazing because you're at that place. It's the exuberant. The reason why you don't feel that way is because you never lived your life that way. You lived your life in perpetual youthfulness. You lived your life in the great this is now. Even if you felt yourself, visiting the past, you lived in the now, you reinvented, you stepped into it, you reinvented, you stepped into it.
right.
And this is probably one of the greatest pains of this process. I said to you today that I wanted to talk about, there are lots of people talking about the beauty and the benefits of aging. We're going to get to that. But this is scary,
It is.
right? It's scary and it's pensive. It's really pensive. It's a study of
Right.
a change now that is more rapid. This is science. This is why I love science, right? Because science tells us that this transition now is more rapid. We are at the age of 65, we are in our elder years. This is our last stage of development. Now that
Mm,
could last
yeah.
65, 75, 85 is the likelihood is between 82 and 85. You're healthy. We are healthy women.
Right.
The part that is the issue is not feeling a day less silly or a day less bodacious,
Yeah.
but watching your body make these changes and know that all you can do, really, the best thing to do is sit back gracefully and let it occur.
Yeah. And that's it. That's the challenge. The challenge is reclaiming our presence and our wisdom and our self-worth beyond what society tells us society's validation. That's a challenge. It is
Yes,
a challenge.
yes, especially at a time when, rightfully so, getting back to, generations behind me. And I'll admit it, I remember growing up and it was like, oh, if they're dancing to Elvis and or Tina Turner, because I saw her at the Apollo when I was 5 years old with my mother and her sister. And she came up and shimmied really close. I was just a little girl because kids, there were no boundaries. They took us everywhere. And I
Exactly.
think, right. And I will never forget, she came up very close and she had this shimmering, gold dress on, and
Uh,
the sweat was pouring off of her. And I knew I was so young. And we snuck there out of like the Hare Krishna compound, and she got close and there were no underwear. That's all I'm going to say.
oh, okay.
I remember going home as a 5-year-old all night long going, wow, like she was powerful. And look at Tina Turner, right? To the end,
To the end.
legs insured,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
My idol found a wonderful man 30 years younger than her.
Yeah.
He stuck around and got taken care of for the rest of his life.
Right. But
But
he
he knew how to
appreciated.
say,
Yeah.
yes, ma'am. Yeah.
And appreciate the wisdom that she probably, bestowed
that
upon
that
him.
that is it. That is that wisdom. That is that wisdom. But at a time, right, I think, bringing my thought back, at a time when we're hearing a lot about older people step down, stop speaking, particularly in politics, which I agree with so much of, all of these big, white guys, all of these old people, step down, move aside. But I do want to say, if we all move aside, who's going to step up? Who amongst you
Mm.
are going to be able to stop speaking your rhetoric,
Mm,
putting so much energy in that you'll actually step up to the plate and flood these counties and jurisdictions and become the new legislative machine.
right.
And we keep stepping up, Angela, because The aging are courageous and knowledgeable in that way,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a conflict.
It is a
Sit down, shut up.
right. But we
Yeah,
still want to hear what you have to say a little bit, but then when we don't like what you say, then we want to pull down and tell you, yes, you're old.
you're old.
Your thinking, your ways of thinking are old and
That's
outdated.
it.
And sometimes they are. Yes, sometimes there are, but there needs to be a balance of, okay, you have the young who have fresh ideas, but you have the older ones who are saying, okay, but do those ideas make sense? Let's look at them on a holistic level. Let's not just look at them piece by piece. Let's look at them holistically to see, do they make sense? So there needs to be a balance of the young with their fresh ideas and the older folks with, let's pull back and look at it.
Wise people, older people help us communicate things with dignity, grace, and wisdom. And at a minimum, even if the differences lie in generational gaps,
Mhm.
the one thing about living on this planet, I have rarely seen a person over 50, 60, cussing someone out because
Right.
one of the things we can do is teach people, teach our young, like John Lewis did, like, like Gator, Bader Ginsburg did,
Mhm.
like, oh my God, so many. Harriet Tubman, she's my favorite. Now that's my girl. I almost changed my name to Moses at some point, but Temple Moses just sounded like a synagogue. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Uh, but I think that there is wisdom in how we deliver our message that really comes from being around a long time, and and we want our youth's voice to count as much as ours. We want ours to count because we know that a time will come that we must go quiet.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
At,
Yeah.
bef- I do want to talk about, and we'll talk about this in a minute. I do want to talk about um, the nonviolent communication that you
Yeah.
have me listening to. But I'm going to ask this question first. How can individuals process the emotional impact of losing aspects of their appearance or physical ability over time? Because that's a real thing. That's a real thing. Even though we might try to hold on to our physical appearance, being able to, do for ourselves at some point, it's going to be a struggle. Hopefully you'll take care of yourself and
Yeah.
so it doesn't impact you, it doesn't impact you a lot, but I mean it is what it is. It happens. Our body starts to deteriorate. So how do we process that emotion?
Wow. I love that question. So this is one of the emotions that is the grief emotion, right? It's that processing loss emotion. It's, we obviously grief is not just a physical dying, it could be the end of a relationship.
Right.
One of the things that happens for us when we get to be over the age of 50, we all have heard about it in ways that are just sort of cheeky, midlife crises, for example, right? But
Yeah.
no one ever take, and that's the struggle with why people decide to get psychotherapy, counseling, or not. They fear, but because mental health really has been marginalized
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
since the dawn of time, right? I mean, really,
Right.
we struggle, and that's why I'm very proud of sisters like Michelle Obama that come straight out and say, "Ooh, this is hard," like, and I, as a therapist, I share with my clients, especially my women of color and my aging women, like, it's okay
Yeah.
to not be normally balanced. right? You can still completely know yourself and feel a little off at times,
Yeah.
but this does harken back to this processing of a loss, but it requires an immediate shift, like the healing of this, right? The fix, because it's not like we have to sit with these things and like let it tear us down until we just lose all hope in ourselves,
Right.
is to actually put the energy and the study into what the body can do now.
Mm.
Listen, this is about radical acceptance. Radical acceptance. My body is changing. Its capacity is changing. So, like, I don't want to be, and this is actually a situation that happened with me last summer around this time in DC when I thought I could go home to my grand life in DC and just stick it out when I know that DC doesn't work for me. But I had a situation with someone close to me who is in her 80s.
Mm.
She said, come help me take apart this bed and we ship it over here to the next place. She has a couple of locations. And I said, you know, I don't think we should do that. Now, my person uh, is thinking nonviolent communication, by the way, is responding to her feeling that I'm speaking to her age.
Oh, okay.
I'm speaking to my age. I don't want to take
Right.
a bed. I get bruises up and down my body. I look like I have been whooped on a daily basis. All I have to do is just like lean against the bed and I'm bruised. My body doesn't roll that way anymore.
Right.
Um, so being able to, so I remember this conflict, it was like, and then it ended up in, my person who is the spouse of a former House speaker saying, you think I'm old, everyone thinks I'm old, and I'm like, you are old, and I am getting older too.
Right.
And what I love about this radical acceptance is I don't have to take a bed apart, fall down, and break my hip and my spleen in order to realize that I don't need to push my body that hard in order to prove something. I can actually sit back like an amazing female, like low key pimp, and say, yeah, come here, young man. Come here, young blood. Can you do this for me?
Right.
Here's some
Exactly.
money.
Right. Exactly. It's funny because
So, yeah, go
I was
ahead.
gonna,
So,
I was gonna,
making it coming in agreement, right, with what
right.
your body can do versus what it can't do.
And that's funny what you said about, the moving thing, because my husband has told many friends, look, and told his, even his father, look, I am, because he's 6 months younger than I am. He says, look, I am 57 years old.
Hire someone.
Hire someone, Dad.
Hire
I'm
someone.
not getting on the roof. I'm not allowing you to get on the roof. I am not moving any boxes.
This was another thing, getting on the roof.
I'm not doing it. And that is that self-acceptance.
Yeah.
But we also
Yeah.
have to remember, and I'm really big into health, holistic healing, and, making sure I'm trying to stay as fit as possible. But also, we got to practice that self-compassion, but we also have to keep moving. And right, the moving doesn't mean I'm helping my buddy move his whole house. No. Movement means getting out walking, swimming, yoga,
You're in it for
dance,
the long game,
the
right?
long
You're
game, and
in it
whatever
for
is
like Pilates. It's
right,
about elongated
right.
approach.
Doing what you enjoy, but also that physical activity so your body can remain resilient and can, continue to move. Yeah, we might not run marathons anymore, but that doesn't mean we can't, do a 5 mile walk on,
That's
3 or 4
right.
times a week. So it's just a matter of, again, having that self-compassion and understanding that, no, I'm not going to do what I did even 10 years ago. I'm going to have to modify it so it works for me so I can remain in the game. and not be
Oh, I
dependent on
can
someone.
remain in the game because our presence
Yes,
is key to the continued development of a nurtured heart society.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Our presence is key. And nobody said, hey, Yoda, you're getting too old and your skin is too wrinkled
Right.
and you have more hair on your ears.
Right.
That's not what they said to Yoda.
They sure didn't. They were like, give me the wisdom. They
Give
want
me
the
the
wisdom.
word,
Right.
bro. Give me the word, right?
Right.
So this is really important. So yeah, so with that, it's more of an acceptance gratitude approach. It is a pivot.
Yeah.
We should, this is, it's one thing to have nonviolent communication with someone else, which is, there are a lot of truths. We were talking earlier about receiving help from younger people. There are a lot of truths, but you know what I know as a woman that in 3 weeks will be 60 years old on May 1st. What I know is something I learned a long time ago from a beautiful lady named Grace. Truth may be truth, but truth without compassion is aggression.
Okay. Truth
Mm,
may be truth, but truth without compassion is aggression. I
that's
like
it.
that.
And today I know that I can tell the truth and speak the truth,
Hmm.
but I don't have to burn down the tree in front of me and tie all the signs around my neck and ah,
Right. Right.
and shove it down your throat.
So, talk a little bit about nonviolent communication. Because
Okay,
I'm still listening to all the episodes, and like I was telling my husband, I'm gonna have to listen to it a number of times because
100%.
we're not used to nonviolent communication, and then it's not what you think it is by the title. Because I was like, what is he talking about?
You're
When I
assuming that some violence is
right.
present.
So talk a little bit about the nonviolent communication.
Sure, Angela. I am so impressed that you have taken to the tools that I've shared with you, and there nothing brings at least a clinical therapist, a psychotherapist that is invested in the wellness and the growth of the people she works with. Nothing is more beautiful than receiving a message saying I read, I actually review the resources that you gave me, and this is the impact it had on me. I remember getting your message and I was just like, really? Oh yeah. Oh, I'm okay. I'm in the right field, I'm on the right track. Um, Nonviolent communication is something that's not often spoken about, I think, in like live interviews.
Hmm.
This is the awesome part because I don't have to look at notes or anything because I've studied it and I love it. And so the thing is, like everything that is invented, we talk about Oprah, we talk about I don't know that anyone can actually come up with anything bad about the Dalai Lama, but there are a couple of leaders like big influencers from the past that I'm thinking of that we can go, oh yeah, but they also,
Right.
well, so can be said about Marshall Rosenberg, who is the author of Nonviolent Communication. When I asked you to listen to it, I think I prefaced it by telling you that it's like listening to paint dry.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it
But the
is.
message, so what are the tenets, right? The tenets of nonviolent communication. Oftentimes, when we speak to each other, we talk to each other, even when we're just listening, we are listening through the lens of, of some emotional trigger,
Mm,
right? We're not even listening to what we're seeing this person the moment they begin speaking. We start our neural algorithm is trained depending on where we come from, the kind of communication patterns we grew up in. But we are trained to think the worst, right?
Right.
The worst. And we're trained to defend ourselves, particularly if we grew up in a household where we were fighting to be heard, or everything we said was wrong, or we were silenced.
Right.
Being silenced is one of the most detrimental things that can happen to a young person, right? To a person in their early, right? So it so here we are now, we're adults, we're at work and we're having all these conflicts. We're in relationships and we're having all these conflicts. We're friends, intimate, other. We're in communities, we're having conflicts. We're just having conflict with ourselves, standing in the mirror. No, you should be thinner. You should be right this. Your nose is too wide. Your nose is too straight. Your skin is too light,
Right.
let alone your skin is too black, right?
Right.
These are ways that we have been trained to think about not just ourselves, but other people. So, this just a little side note, a little side theory about projecting oneself, right? Every Neville Goddard. So
Right.
I'm going to mix the two, right?
I
Yeah,
like Neville.
Neville Goddard and nonviolent communication. So one of the things you have to remember about nonviolent communication is that if we show up and push ourselves out, then everything that we receive back is going to be a reflection of that.
Right.
Nonviolent communication, we recognize that we've been programmed this way and we want to change it. We've been programmed this way and it's not useful. We've been programmed this way and it's not helpful. We've been programmed this way and we have a lot of other positive strengths that exist in these relationships and in our core values,
Mm-hmm.
that in order to have an easier life, an easier way of walking through life,
Mm-hmm.
we might have to begin to see people and what we think they're thinking, what we think they say, in a very different way.
And that's hard.
Yes, it is.
I'm you,
It is about letting go of everything you think you know about anything and just allowing it to occur, recognizing the feeling that um, wells up inside you,
Mhm.
not judging the feeling, but observing it and making note. After all, Angela, the scientists, right? Just pure scientists. The scientists are in the room. Just imagine them. They have their lab coats on. They're black. They're women, or they're Indian. They're Native American. Oh yeah, in fact, they're Native American women, and they're scientists, right? And one has the salt and one has the pepper, and they put it together, and they sit back, and the salt and pepper start to bubble up. The scientists, because they're objective as scientists, not subjective, they don't go, oh my God, the salt and the pepper is bubbling up and look at the mess it's making. They go, oh, that's interesting. That's what happens when the salt and pepper are mixed together. Huh, okay. Now, if this is not the result I'm trying to achieve, perhaps we should add less salt or less pepper or more of one or more of the other. Objectively, they can see it not being so emotionally affected,
Right.
right? So they respond to what they're trying to achieve ultimately versus what they believe they are hearing and seeing from this person, because we acknowledge that we're programmed to be skewed.
Do you think nonviolent communication, the whole thought process has an impact on us as we age? And if so, what is that impact and how can we work on work on it? Because
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, because after listening to a couple of the episodes, And like I said, it's something I'm going to have to listen to over and over and over again. And me trying to work on, listen to what he's saying and then work on it within myself because the way I'm thinking now is so deep in my subconscious. It's like I'm fighting with myself to I'm fighting with myself.
Let me encourage you. If it were that deep reaching into your subconscious, you wouldn't be here addressing it now.
Okay. No, we're not having a therapy session, y'all. No, but okay, so go back to the aging part. How does that impact
Yes.
us?
So what I would say to this, and it is, I can't escape the fact that I know a little bit about you privately, but publicly that you're married for 3 decades. I mean, I've the only thing I've done for 3 decades consistently is maintained my grill. That's it. You know. Uh,
All right.
but because the two of you are at the stage in your life that you are now, which are the the twilight years, really, when we think about it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, simmer down now, right? Nobody's dying tomorrow. But the point is, you've after 30 years, you've seen it all, you've done it all. You're not aging alone. You're aging in coupledom. You're
Right.
aging with a husband.
Hmm.
Separate from whatever your personal plans are for yourself and how your future journey, right, in this next,
Right.
uh, okay, 25 years. That's the whole point, right? The
Right.
one thing that we know that's different. Remember, there was a time you'd be like, okay, I'm 30. Oh, I'm badass. I'm 40, but
Right.
I still have 40 more years ahead of me. Well, I'm beyond that now. Best I can hope for is 20 good years.
Right.
Now, that's a fact. It's not about, oh, it could be more than that. It could be better than. Listen, y'all, this process is going down.
Yeah.
In your aging process, how nonviolent communication is helpful is because you have still
Hmm.
several, 2.5, 3 decades, could
Right.
be 4, you're Black after all, of interactions, social interactions, and intimate interactions ahead of you.
Right.
So, it goes back to that thing about it never being too late. And today I know better, right? Today I know different. I know more. I know better. And because I know better, I get to do better. And I do better today because I know better today, not yesterday, not 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, today. And I think the aging process puts that and highlights
Okay.
that sufficient is the day, now's the time.
Okay. Okay.
I want my years ahead of me to be more cohesive,
Yes.
more to be easier, to
Hmm.
be more elevated, to be more adventurous.
Yeah.
And since I share this time with someone, how I communicate that
Hmm.
and communicate who I think I'm becoming or I'm confused I'm not because it's happening anyway,
Hmm.
it's going to be really important if you're sharing your experience.
Okay. And I know this is kind of is, but not off topic when it comes to aging and in your personal experience speaking with, um, women of a certain age, do you find it more difficult for them to talk to their husbands or their significant others about that this change? Because as we talked about before, you hit 50, 55, and I've said that on many of my other episodes, you hit that 50s, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, an epiphany, or I mean, just things change all of a sudden. Your brain is just like, what? I'm not doing that. I don't want to hear that bullshit. You know, so I mean, what do you tell your clients when they come in and they're like, there's a change. What do you,
There is a change. You know, Angela, I'm so happy that you asked me this question. My perspective is, and definitely bringing in clinical research, right? Clinical perspective based on doing the numbers of those who are willing to report, you know. My perspective is that women are more eager to, or more, feel that they need to more explain these the changes, right? To get some understanding and around these changes, or maybe perhaps to have our partners chime in, but what, you know, with the like acknowledge and validate. But the funny thing is that as I work as a therapist a long time in my role, right, over 25 years, working with people, the worries that kind of worry that you just named
Mhm.
is just the same stuff that was hanging around when you guys were first making out in the back of the car at 25 years old,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, you know this, we know not just our partners, but we know our children. We know by the time you get to be this age, I think it's some of the good practices to be able to say, I don't have all the words for it. Remembering that men are more likely to they're going through the changes as well. It's just that women are trained to need some level of validation, or to have things checked out or checked, you know, through by someone validation.
Okay.
Men are like, I'll just be over here in the corner grumpy and say nothing. Grow hair on my balls and then complain about not having sex. Right?
Right.
I'll just make myself undesirable. Women are just like, I want you to understand. I am
Okay.
changing. I am different. We are very different, men and women.
Yeah.
But if we remember that still, even in our evolution and our progression, especially for women like you, or any woman, any couple that has been married for decades, right? Henry VIII never had a partnership last that long, right? Everybody died. That's me. That's like me and my ex-husbands. Everybody's gone. But no, really, that to understand that men are, we are conditioned to accept that men don't verbalize emotions or hold in. That doesn't mean that they're not going through this transition. They're
Right.
just, and this is where nonviolent communication, though it might be a bit of a stretch to be able to say, if I'm feeling, if I'm going through these changes, you must be too. You don't speak to me about it,
Right. That makes
but
sense.
I'd love to hear you put some words on it.
That makes sense.
Not you don't talk to me,
Right.
right? Which is taking it, now you're tripping that lever of that emotional past trauma, which we don't need to go to anymore. We know that. We name it. Go call it Gloria. Oh, Gloria, what's wrong? She's like, I've been insulted, you know?
Mm.
And you're like, no, no, no. He's just doesn't have the words.
Doesn't have the words. Okay.
He doesn't have the words, but I can tell him what my words are. But
Mhm.
as women, you know, right? Yeah. So I think we can say what we feel, but we don't have to explain
Okay.
what we feel.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
Say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can also say, I think that you're asking too much of me at this stage. I'd like you to be more independent. I need to be more independent. I need to be less um, available.
Right. Yeah.
No, 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 less responsible. How can we, what are the solutions? Solution focused therapy, right? We're
Mm,
getting older now. Do we need to throw some money at this? Do we need to have someone come over and do shopping every
right.
week and don't even tell anybody?
Right. Okay. At what point does concern about aging cross over into anxiety that may need therapeutic support?
Absolutely. Look, when age related concerns start to affect your daily life, this, by the way, this is normal. This is a process of letting go of grieving, losing our hair. I'm someone with a massively thinning hair. Uh, Over the pandemic, my hairline just like disappeared.
Mhm.
Luckily, I have an amazing product that I use, and it's just like changed, life changing. And I think about, so these things are happening, and as these changes occur, sometimes we get depressed. Listen, it's not just the ones you can see on the outside, it's how our internal system is able to process
Mhm.
food and eating patterns, pains and discomfort in areas in your stomach and abdomen that maybe you never had in the past, maybe having more diarrhea or more constipation. All of this is part of that ritual of the body and the internal organs transitioning. They don't have the power and they're not supposed to function the way they did when they were fresher, young,
Right.
right? And by the way, I always love this movie Benjamin Buttons because it tells the story backwards. So it's not just always what we see on the outside. I mean, I always say as a 60-year-old woman, I mean, I'm age defying in some respects on the outside,
Right.
but I see. And I don't need to be age defying. None of us needs to be age defying. That, and if we feel that we need to, or we are going through the changes alone without support,
Mhm.
especially if we feel really vital and young and spicy. No
Right.
one wants to be the old person at the club.
Right.
Uh, you know,
Right.
and if those were the ways, especially too, that you got a lot of great, social feeding.
Hmm.
It is true that as you age, especially if you age single, I'm a single woman.
Yeah.
Um, but I've been married and I can't complain. My friends say I've been married 3 times. It's disgraceful. But my friends say that no one's asked me to marry once. So I have some really nice ex-husbands, by the way. They're really great guys. I'm not good at it,
Okay.
I know that. I'm just really poor at this. But I think that when no, in all jokes aside, if you find yourself really focused on whatever you perceive to be the negative aspects of aging,
Mhm.
your deficits, you begin to feel depressed or anxious, you
Mm.
begin to self isolate and start avoiding social situations,
Yeah.
have excessive worry, persistent sadness.
Yeah.
It's time to speak at a minimum if you're afraid of taking the leap for therapy, psychotherapy. At a minimum, speak to your PCP,
Yeah.
go to your primary care physician and say, well, turns out I'm 65 and My husband died a couple of years early. I'm 70 years old because, you know, women, science tells us we're going to live an average of 10 to 12 years after our spouses die. And
Wow.
the male spouse is more likely to die before we are. Okay, this is just the way the trends are.
Yeah.
We won't get deep into that, but that is a trend. So, um, when you are older, your life is changing. Not only are you getting older, but because you're getting older, things are happening around
Yeah.
illness,
Right.
incapacity. Yeah. So at that point, we don't want to wear our family and friends out
Right. Right.
with our SAG. Just hire a therapist.
Yeah.
Your PCP is going to say, let's talk about starting this medication, but I want you to see someone
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
because they're not there, you know, to do. And a good therapist, right, should really address the issues that you come to the table with. And one of the things I said to you was we got to know each other through a way that had us, you know, kind of visible. But when, as you know, when we hit that session, it's all right, business, you know,
Right. Right.
we are here, right, to not talk about the birds and the bees
Right.
as
Exactly.
much as we are, right? So that's the glory of training.
Okay.
Saging thing is real.
It is real.
It can be a lonely process, even if you're surrounded by others.
Right. Exactly. What are some ways to work through our feelings or regret?
Uh, woo. So, we don't get to go back, right? We don't get to go back, fix the past necessarily or redo it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely normal to have regret and melancholy about the past.
Yeah.
This is called the life review process.
Okay.
This life review process be- begins to be more present in our ego, the id, the superego dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
and more of a review, regret, past review after we turn 55 years old. So we know that that's natural.
Mm-hmm.
What I find to be useful and what I would like to encourage everyone to do, especially if you have, you know, real stuff in the past. Some of us are addicts. Some of us have cheated. Some of us have lied. Some of us have embarrassed ourselves. Listen, and I use that in the I sort of statement. We all have things. Some of us were not able to cultivate healthy relationships with our children or our parents. Listen, well, we cannot into these into these twilight years.
Mm-hmm.
We have to decide: is it useful?
Yeah.
Is it useful
Right.
for me to take this shame forward, this guilt forward? And if I truly have something that I want to rectify, I wish I could have done differently. Since I could not, since that's done with, how do I do this? How do I make sense of it now? My way, Angela, is to take each step of each moment of the day in the
Mm.
shoes of my living amends.
Okay.
um, the living amends I made to God and to myself. So I can't undo all the things I wish I had done differently. I have to practice that radical acceptance right there
Mm-hmm.
that these things occurred and transpired exactly in the way they needed to for me to have the divine blessing or the divine blessing, right?
Right.
The divine lesson or the divine blessing.
Right. Right.
Sounds better that way.
Right.
Um, yeah. And so it hurt me, others, every time I think of it which I rarely do anymore, let's be real, because aging does suss some of that stuff out unless
Right.
you're
Right.
just really stunted.
Yeah.
But when I do, ooh, no, you know what? I can walk in that living amends today. The living amends that I make to be a better person, and I mean that. Kind, truthful, generous, funny, lighthearted, supportive. This is all I have power over today.
Okay.
So every day it's like I am a oh man, yep, but I'm a living amends. I'm a living amends. I have to be. Many of us have wreckage in the past.
Mm-hmm.
These things, Angela, our experiences, our upbringings, our um, poverty, not only physical poverty, but poverty of mind and heart, right? The things that we had no control over. And then the things that we did have control over, and we just chose poorly. We just chose poorly. It had some circumstances. Well, guess what? All of these things, the way I see it in this world being as big as it is, are just some SOME of who we are, not the sum SUM of
Right.
who we
Who we
are,
are. Right.
unless we place that the energy and importance there. If we decide it is, well then fine.
Yeah. Okay.
I like to pivot it and just say what she said.
Okay. I'm gonna take a quick.
Otherwise, what do? You die, right? You die of shame and guilt and sadness. That's when you want to come see a therapist.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Before it's too late. And I guess it's never
Before
too
it's too
late.
late.
I
It's
guess.
never too late, but I will say as a clinical therapist, we do get more firm in our ways and less pliable as we get older.
Yes.
And that is just that's a thing.
Yeah.
And I do find I highly recommend that women, if you've made to the age to 50 and you're not seeing anyone and you saw the college counselor, just get yourself into a good clinical counseling community with a therapist that can help you understand the chemical, the developmental trends, the past,
Yeah.
right? These things from studying the human condition, because they're beautiful years,
Yeah.
but they're rocky years too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All of your humility will be need to be ushered in after the age of 55, and there's nothing wrong. I say that feeling as youthful as the next person.
Yeah.
That's it. So you know what? We stop looking for